Hello and welcome, everyone. Today, we're hosting the first edition of our Beroe's In the Know product showcase series for 2026. The title for today's session will be The Next Chapter in Supplier Discovery with Beroe and Forestreet, what's available today and what's now possible. I'm joined by two panelists who are Prerna Dhawan and David Doyle. Prerna is the Chief Product Officer at Beroe, with 18 years of experience in procurement technology and product leadership. She leads Beroe's product and solutions strategy globally, driving innovation across Beroe Live.ai to help procurement teams make faster, smarter sourcing decisions. And David began his career as a qualified accountant before moving into major systems implementation. He later became a partner at PwC, leading the data analytics practice and serving on the firm's global technology leadership team. In 2017, he co founded Forestreet with Alex Miller to reimagine supplier discovery as a modern alternative to traditional research. David and Prerna, welcome. Just a few quick housekeeping. We'll go through the session today and we invite you to share any questions and queries or comments that you may have in the chat and the Q&A section. And we will be addressing all of your questions in a Q&A section towards the end of the session. You will receive a recording of the webinar as a follow-up. And here's what we're going to cover in today's session. So the story behind the acquisition of Forestreet, why Forestreet and why now? Also, what does this investment mean for you? Some real use cases that need deeper supply intelligence, as well as a live demo, and it will allow you to review a side-by-side discovery in action. We'll also take a look at how you can make the most of your current supplier discovery. We'll have a Q&A section at the end of the session. Prerna, can you tell us why Beroe acquired Forestreet? And before that, can you also tell us why finding the right suppliers fast still matters?
Yeah, thanks, Subul, and hello, everyone. I think for everybody who's in procurement, I think suppliers are one of our biggest constituencies. And while we may think that we've been sourcing from third parties for many years, we should really know who our supply base is, what our options are. That's not really true. And in fact, we've seen this in the last 6 to 7 years during COVID and since as well. That as we live in a polycrisis world, there are often situations that demand for us to look for new suppliers, alternative suppliers, and not just those changes internally in the business or more at a macro level. There's actually a lot of innovation that's happening in the supply base, especially now that you look at new kinds of companies coming up with newer business models, more AI enabled business models, completely new ways of doing things. So that does mean that discovering new suppliers that can add value to your business is a very, very big thing to look at. It's not something that you can overlook, and I believe that we would all also agree that when you look for suppliers or the choices you make do have a very big impact on operational resiliency for your business, your cost structures, as well as the risk exposure. Now, given that this is such a massive use case for our procurement customers, we did look at what was Beroe already providing and how do we extend that capability and what our options were. If I go back a few years, we did have a list or a database sort of approach to supply discovery, which meant that we were covering a few 100,000 suppliers, and our customers could come in and look for a supplier from within that list. However, I think, like I said, the world's changing very fast. New companies are coming up all the time. We wanted to provide our customers a capability that allows them to deal with these disruptions, look for suppliers that are beyond the big names and that are companies that you may not have heard of, you're not working with. And which is when we had to look at a decision, which was, should we build some capability internally at Beroe as part of our roadmap, or should we look for a partner a company that's already doing something amazing in this area. And of course, we went ahead and we found Forestreet. We realized that they have been much more ahead in terms of their technology capabilities. They've been using AI. They've been building their proprietary web scraping models, proprietary algorithms and LLMs to look for solving this exact problem, which is why we started with a partnership, but then went on for a full acquisition to really look at how do we make this very critical capability available to our customers within the Beroe Live.ai platform. And the kind of comparisons we were doing when we were looking at the best partner were what sort of reach does Forestreet have? And if I look at it, there are many other databases or registry-led tools or other solutions that basically work on a fixed database that is updated on a periodic basis. Or at the other end, there are broader web crawls that are happening without really putting in the procurement context, without really taking a B2B enterprise solution, which is all what Forestreet is doing. When I look at how results are created from a Forestry, and we're going to see that in a demo in a few minutes, it is about taking a more category-led approach, applying the context in which the discovery is happening, rather than more of an entity-based lookup or a keyword-based list, which can only get you so far. So how do you really create those sort of knowledge graphs in terms of I am looking for this product or service in this industry and I'm looking for a supplier like this? That is not something you can solve by basic keyword searches or entity lookups. And again, we'll see more of this when we get to the demo. What we also realized is that if I look at the database solutions or more human-led manual approaches, they do work. However, it's not great when we are working in a complex, constrained environment where time is of the essence, where some of our searches are quite complex and also something which is more novel. So if this is not something as a capability or an area that has well-defined tags or keywords, it wasn't something that we were getting results in other solutions, which we did find Forestreet was quite advanced at. So that's pretty much a summary of why we went ahead and brought in the Forestreet capability, the solution, but also the wider team, which helps us grow our technology and AI capabilities in a big way.
Thank you, Prerna. David, can you tell us what this investment means for Beroe's customers?
Yes, so we've been very much, as was mentioned before, we set up Forestreet in 2017, and we've been absolutely focused on this question. So we built out a very deep capability around supplier discovery and the sort of the market analysis, giving the sort of a rich contextual sort of surround for supplier discovery. And in simple terms, what we do is that's all now available to Beroe's customers. And in a sense, I'll take you through this over the course of the explanation and the demo. But we're offering now kind of a sort of an increased level of granularity, and if you like, sort of an ability to do more targeted search. So we've got sort of more data which we can make available. We've got a sort of a higher number of variables now that we can start to stitch together in terms of asking those very specific, very constrained questions. And around that, we can now sort of provide this sort of deeper contextual analysis. So for examples being like sort of verifying actual physical locations, for example. We take in the Forestreet capability, which we're adding into the Beroe suite, we now have this ability to look at sort of company news, look at sort of innovations and alternative solutions to the one that the user initially is looking for. So the last statement on this slide is sort of saying that our ambition is sort of, better shortlist, fewer RFIs. And that's really been our goal, and our mission is to really sort of take as much information as we can, synthesize that into some really sort of useful exploratory capabilities, and then put that in the hands of the user so they can run those really sort of deep, those deep searches. We might never get to sort of totally replace the RFI. There are some sort of very detailed contextual questions which might ultimately just have to be answered by directly by the vendor themselves. But we're trying to fill all of the other space as much as we can, using lots of multiple sources to pull it together, and some very smart sort of analytics on top of that to sort of verify and make sense of that information. One of the scenarios that always occurs to me is thinking about you remember when sort of obviously the pandemic hit and everyone was searching for people that could make PPE, right? It was incredibly difficult. The amount of trouble and trauma that caused for governments and entities around the world in terms of trying to find that type of material. And in our head is the idea that if something like that happens, we have the capability to scan globally and stand up the answers to that question in record time. So that's where we're heading. So if that's the capability, I guess the next question is, so why don't we just embed this directly into Beroe and it becomes the default search engine for supply discovery? Well, there's some good reasons for that based on our experience of working with procurement functions. I think really the basic one is that there are sort of, to some extent, the total Forestreet suite is overkill for a standard sourcing process. You'll see that it's quite rich. It can be quite complicated. It takes slightly longer time than what we do within the standard sourcing offering within Beroe Live.ai. So the way that we look at this is saying, where we have known categories, where we think the assumptions around those categories are relatively stable, we've built the Beroe capability, the one that's within Live.ai at the moment, to deliver against that particular requirement. Now, when we get into the more complex sourcing world, which is where we sort of might have a new category, which is we don't have expertise within, we might have a very complex market where things have changed. Sometimes there might be market or supply shocks, or indeed we're just moving into a new geography. Then we sort of, our assumptions aren't settled, and we need to understand a bit more of the context around that. What the capabilities are being offered in the marketplace, how they compare to each other. What's the span between full service providers and people that are doing one very specialist component of what's required for the category. And so that's why we're dividing this capability. And what we expect is that a subset of Beroe's client base will find this very, very valuable, but we're not going to force it on everyone, because we sort of want people to understand when they might sort of apply it or not. And just to make that a little bit real for people, I guess it gives some examples when I talk about complex sourcing and some things that our clients have experienced, quite recently. So just to get an idea of the types of use cases where the advanced supply discovery is being deployed. This could be sort of completely new categories. There was one defense agency we mentioned where was challenged with building drones, and the drones had to be built using from the component level upwards, because they didn't want to source from a particular sort of military industrial complex, if you like. So understanding what the components of a drone are, how to put that together, where you can source all these various components and put it together, that's the sort of thing that they would use the advanced discovery platform for. It could be new geographies. We've had a famous retail brand going into Japan, needed to find in-store promotional materials. How do they surface that locally when they don't actually have any physical presence on the ground at this point? Supply shocks. We famously, a US bourbon manufacturer managed to effectively have a very strong legal disagreement with their maple charcoal supplier and ended up with a very difficult supply issue. So again, they use the tool to try and map out alternative suppliers, but not just alternative suppliers who are focused on the distilling industry, other providers that could step up, who are busy looking at other verticals, but could actually step across and help them to solve that supply gap. And then another example in terms of where people use it for sort of innovation scouting, we had a luxury handbag manufacturer, traditional, famous for their leather work effectively, but wanted to step out and start to use high-tech fabrics. Well, again, no experience in-house of high-tech fabrics. They want to understand what the landscape looks like, and they use the advanced supply discovery to do that and make sure they understand the scope, the depth, and the sort of the geographical locations of all of those types of supply. So that's the sort of the difference, if you like, between where you might use standard sourcing and complex sourcing. And hopefully that makes sense. And what I'll do is I'll obviously run through a demo with you, and then I'll expand a little bit in terms of what the key differences are between those two approaches, how you experience it as a user. We can step on a slide. So when we talk about this advanced supply discovery, it is a much larger data pack that we use. And again, part in terms of thinking about what's the right tool for the right job. So when we use the advanced supply discovery, we're pulling in from a lot more data sources. That's things like map locations, We're looking at news across about 400 different providers. We're pulling in information around key executives, LinkedIn profiles, etc., and also things like legal structures of companies. So that's examples of where we're bringing in a much richer data set. We also then process that in a more rigorous and in-depth way. We look at things, we link all of those components dynamically. So you end up with much longer chains of variables that you can put together. I want a specific set of capabilities and certifications based in a certain location, revenue of X, and so those long chains of capability can start to be put together and can answer more complex questions. You'll see when I show you the tool that all of that information is linked dynamically. So there's a huge indexing engine that sits behind that to make sure that everything is searchable and you can put all those things together. We do this stuff like translation in simple terms. So we work globally. We'll translate all of the terms and the jargon and bring that back and then again index it. We use our own proprietary LLMs to do sort of more specific checks around capabilities and how closely that ties back to the original search terms. The outputs are slightly different. We can deliver both PowerPoint reports about the marketplace automatically and also a really detailed supplier dossier containing things like Porter's 5 forces, latest news and events, and things that impact the conversation that one would expect to have with a client. So that processing time takes in a lot more data, does a lot more work to it. And so if you compare to sort of just a few minutes for running a sort of the end-to-end discovery for the standard process, this is actually end-to-end process could be up to an hour and a half. So again, you're stepping out of the workflow, doing something slightly different. And again, it's because actually this is very much a discovery process and you're trying to pick up information and be confident about what is happening as you build that set of assumptions in terms of looking at this space.
Thank you, David. And can you also tell our audience, does this mean additional logins or having to log into a different platform in order to access this solution?
Excellent question. And great news, because actually there will be no additional logins for this effectively. So we will integrate into the Beroe platform. So whether you're using the standard Supplier Discovery or advanced, you will go through one login. There's no more. This is not another tool on the stack. This is just access. It's another module that is available to you through the Beroe subscription.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'd like to tell the audience that if you stick around to us the end of the session, you'll have the opportunity to request a free trial of the Advanced Supplier Discovery solution. David, let's experience both Supplier Discovery paths in action now. Could you tell us about the category that you're going to show us today?
Yes, so we're going to talk about undersea drilling equipment for oil and gas. Now, again, let's be really clear, this is just an example. Okay, it could be absolutely anything. It could be shoe hygiene technology in the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. It could be recyclable packaging for takeaway foods. The thing here is we've got a sort of, if you think about this almost in terms of a Venn diagram, we've got a context, it's undersea. We've got a requirement, it's drilling equipment, and it's in a particular vertical. So think about those in terms of putting together quite a specific set of questions. And this is really key to how we're going to dig into those things. Now, I'm conscious that when you sit on these demos, sometimes you just feel the screens blasting at you sort of left, right, and center. So I might oversimplify this, but bear with me. What I'm going to take you through is 5 steps. Step 1, I'm going to run that query into the standard sourcing module on Beroe Live.ai. We're going to show the results and show you the types of output, and you can see the commonality. And then I'm going to rerun the same query, and I'm going to do this in the advanced discovery. So you've got a side-by-side comparison. You can see how the query operates, what the results look like in terms of that additional processing, what the actual outputs of those would be. And then we're going to go all the way down to that sort of a detailed vendor profile. So you can see actually, okay, I'm trying to understand the market. I've now got an idea of the criteria I'm trying to supply to the market. I'm getting towards a sort of short list of potential vendors. And now I'm going to do a deep dive on one of those vendors. And so I can understand exactly as much as possible about who they are, what I should be talking to them about, and how they fit into this overall category. So at this point, I'm going to jump into the demo. Thank you. I'll share my screen. So in the interest of time, I'm going to step through some tabs here rather than let all the processes run, etc., because we sort of want to show you exactly how it works, and then we can get a good idea of the end-to-end process. So the first thing I'm going to do is start the new Supplier Discovery. I'm on the standard Supplier Discovery. It's currently available within Beroe Live.ai, and let's put in that query. So within this, as you'll know, I'm looking. In this case, going to choose service providers that deliver that capability, and I'm going to look globally. In this case, obviously within, as you'll know, within this field, you can search. Very importantly, I'm going to use keywords, and this will help me to refine the search. I'll make this point probably as we go through a number of times. The available reservoir of vendors is over 200 million. So we have to be quite accurate at this end to get good results at the other end, and that's the same for both modules. So if I take things like subsea production system, let's say drilling the rigs, well interventions, typically 3 to 5 is pretty good, and it's like subsea inspection monitoring tools. And then let me run that search. So that will run. That'll take 4 or 5 minutes. That'll run. I'm actually now just going to jump onto the output of that so we can see what it looks like, and as this is all fairly new. So we've got here the system has generated a list of companies, and we have a series of filters. So these are again sort of relatively straightforward. These are sort of and type. I'd like headquarter location in Australia, operating location, plus a revenue of X, plus employees, and then and if I want to, I can obviously use NAICS codes as well as a way of refining that search. So a sort of simple series of and requests that I could put into this put into the tool, and that gives me sort of a good list. I'm fairly confident in this area, and it will list a whole series of companies for me, and using kind of NAICS codes and other clues that we've got within the system. So there we go. Now, let's just look at a sort of if we're going to use Oceaneering International as a good example as we go through this. So very specialist undersea engineering firm. Look at those. If I click on the link, you can see that there's going to be a company profile, tells you what they do, contact details, the sort of key firmographic information about them, and some company classifications. And I can add those to my shortlist and move forward within my workflow. So that's a sort of if you like, the record that we're going to produce in terms of that same query. I'm confident. I know broadly what I'm looking for. I know where I'm looking for them, and actually, I can generate my list in a relatively straightforward, sort of within the workflow within which I'm working. So if I'm going to do that, replicate that search within the advanced Supplier Discovery, you'll see some differences start to happen, sort of almost straight away. So let me do that, and then you can see the side-by-side comparison in terms of what's available. So the start point is not a million miles away. What am I searching for? I am looking for, I can put in the same query, but also here I can also look for companies like, so if I put in Oceaneering, I can look for companies like that. The system will go off and fundamentally read the website, understand it, contextualize it, and say, okay, that's a subsea engineering firm, works in these locations, so I'm looking for other companies like that. And so that's the first gateway which you might go in a slightly different direction. But here I'm going to try this undersea. So let me just run that query, and then you'll start to see the system will start to clarify my intentions from the off. So you'll see that the system will start to do things like sort of, okay, this is what I understand you're looking for, and refine the sort of play the search back to us. There will again be the opportunity to add keywords, either system suggested or ones that you want to add yourself. So let me just put in some of those. So there's some marine drilling equipment. We can generate more, obviously. Again, we can do location search. I'm going to keep this global for the moment. And then I'm being forced to do similarly manufacturers, service providers, distributors, or consultants. And then the final piece here, again, another gateway between the system we've seen and this, is I can do the search in one of two ways. I can do a quick explorer, which will effectively tell the system to be confident about the list it generates. The system will generate the list. It will then enrich that list and create the data cube, which I'm going to show you later on. You can choose an interim process here, which is to review and select. Now, again, if I'm fairly new to this category, I might use review and select, because what it will do is the system will suggest 50 companies that it thinks meet my criteria, and it will do some early categorization and then surface the website to me in a pre-delivered form so I can quickly work through them. And this might be where I'm saying, okay, I don't know whether I'm going to have to put together lots of different providers to get the whole capability I'm looking for, or actually they're going to be full service providers, etc. out there. So I might be starting to trying to get my head around the marketplace and really what are the right things for me to search for. And are there any capabilities that I wasn't aware of at this point that actually I think ought to be added into my search terms? So there's, again, a fork in the road that we can do there. But the process, again, it's just very simple. We do launch discovery, and then the system will actually take all those criteria, all the refinements I've made, and then go off, and it will actually go and try and find companies that fit the criteria. And it will do that using, broadly speaking, about 25 different variables, 25 different processes, which we use to identify companies that within that sort of 200 or so million companies that fit within the criteria we're looking for. Okay, so that's going to run. That typically, the process probably takes about 5 minutes to get to the interim step. In terms of the overall timescale for this, which is the output of that query, will be available generally between 5 and 10 minutes after I've pressed that button, but it will come in a sequence, right? So it will, the very easy information, where are they based, what's the headcount, what's the revenue figures, that will come very quickly. And then there's the back end of the system is now doing lots of sort of intelligent sort of collation of the information that's come through. And I'll show you some examples of how that surfaces. So there's 3 examples I'm going to give you in terms of the analysis tools within the system. There are about a dozen in total. So here we've got, you'll see that a version of this sits within the standard sourcing module. The key difference here is there's a lower level of granularity and it's dynamic. So in this case, I'd often use this in a discussion with the business to talk about, okay, we're interested in undersea drilling equipment for oil and gas. These are all of the sort of terms that sit underneath that umbrella term. Which ones are we really interested in? Is it all of this? Subsea decommissioning, subsea control systems, marine drilling risers. Again, I don't know this particular category, but it's allowing me to see all of the jargon that's related to the category and all the things that might come under this term. I can also then use it dynamically. So if I'm looking at drilling mud circulation systems, I can click on that and the system will automatically filter my list to show me those companies that are talking about both drilling mud circulation systems and synonyms of that. So that's a way for me to just understand the breadth and the scope of this marketplace. The second one I'm going to show you is a system-generated feature map. Again, there is a static version of this that sits within the standard sourcing module. But what's really interesting here in terms of the advanced one is this is editable. So I can start to look at a set of very specific requirements. So if I, for instance, want to have a company that does riser monitoring, in this case, I can also add and edit this. So if there, for instance, there are specific certifications that I'm very much interested in, I can add those as part of my requirements. And then all of a sudden, I can start to filter through this. So this is dynamic. So I can filter on any of these blue boxes you can see, which is just a sort of a 3-level taxonomy of the marketplace. And I can start to put those chains of questions together in terms of what I'm looking for. So that's an editable piece that the procurement professional can use to start to really narrow down from what could be a very expansive field into something which is very specific. And the final thing, which I mentioned before, is just about the sort of thinking about sort of verification of physical location. So here, I've actually got a sort of a map which shows you the locations of all the companies that I've pulled up within this search. And again, I can start to do some very detailed interrogation. So if in oil and gas, I'm very much interested in companies which are physically present within the Houston area, then again, I can use that. I can drill down, have a look. And often when I'm looking at sourcing for capability across multiple territories, I might be looking, for instance, for a company that's headquartered somewhere, and then that can show me that they've got physical locations in the marketplaces that I'm interested in. So again, it's just sort of this idea of everything being indexed and linked to the ability to put these long chains of questions together. Now, what you can also do with this is start to generate a report. So one of the things you can do on the system is actually say, okay, I've decided on the companies I'm interested in, and what I'd like to do is provide an overview. I wanted to go into a discussion with my stakeholders about what it is we want to do in this particular category, and the system will generate either a PowerPoint or a PDF report for you, which you can use and edit to go and have that conversation with. But I'll give you an example maybe of those of how those things come together. Let me just show the analysis tool so I get a bit more real estate on the screen. And to do a very, very simple one. So let's say I'm interested I want United States companies. I want a reasonably substantial company, over $1 billion in revenue. And actually, I'm going to go back and say, what I really want them to do is, I've got a particular capability. I'm in the Gulf of Mexico. It's very deep. And so let me just go and use my feature map to say what I'm going to do here is I want a deep water capability as well. So I put that chain of questions together. Based in the US, over $1 billion of revenue, they need to have a deep water capability. And then we end up with our sort of a very short list here, which is of the 50 companies, we can be certain that these three companies all talk about those things. And so I can then say, okay, that's great. Let me look at a bit more detail about those companies. So we've got Oceaneering International here. So again, compared to the standard sourcing version I've shown you, we've got a richer data set here. So we're saying, obviously, again, what they do. We're also looking at a slightly more broader set of infographic data. We can look at things like the legal entity structure. So what's all of the different subsidiaries that they have with them, all the way down here to see who's the CEO, Roderick Larson. And then we can start to pull over things like people, in terms of who are the key people here. And so this is a list of executives typically that we pull out in terms of the key individuals in the organization. And then there's a whole series of other analysis tools, such as news and events. So news and events is additional compared to the study that we did within the standard sourcing platform. And again, it's indexed, it's searchable. If there are very specific issues that you wanted to look for, then all of this information is captured. It can be searched on very specific terms or combinations of terms effectively. So there's that list. So you get to sort of a deeper understanding of that particular company. It doesn't take you everything. It doesn't do a really deeper analysis, but that's the next step in the process. So again, go back to this idea, new market, understood the components, the capabilities of the marketplace, down to some specific capabilities, who's definitely got those to offer, gives me to a short list. And now I'm thinking about this short list, I can go in and I can have a deeper look in terms of Oceaneering International. You can see I've starred the company within this dashboard, and I can then take you into what we can do in terms of a deep dive around, in this case, Oceaneering International, provider of subsea engineering services, and I'll just flip on to that final step in the process. So again, just remind you, come step down in that funnel, and now we ought to know about this company profile. So, interestingly, in Oceaneering International, going to want to talk to them, probably so I want to sort of as much background information as I can gather in terms of understanding who they are, what services they offer, what's the environment in which they work. The first page of this 4 pages is relatively standard, expect in terms of it tells you, repeat some of the information about who they are and what they do, bit of sort of key firmographic. But now we're starting to get into some more detailed information. So I can start to look at sort of the revenue graph over time. I can look at key events, and we'll start to get into this piece around key developments in the marketplace, and also, and excuse me if this is kind of scrolling in your eyes are starting to spin a little bit. Any reputational issues that might have be relevant to this. And again, because because this is automated, we're sort of really careful in terms of how we work this. So we have the source documentation. These tabs, 1, 2, 3, you can see on the right-hand side, they take you to the source of the information. So what we're always trying to do is make sure that you can verify where the information has come from. We will overlay some smarts on top of that, saying, the Financial Times is a more reliable place to get our information than maybe some, as mentioned, some other publications. And so we're doing some verification on that. And we're also doing some smarts around, we have agents within this talking to each other saying, I've got the same information that you've got. That means it's probably more credible. So we can promote that within what we're trying to do. So that's the first piece. And you'll get down to some good old fashioned MBA type SWOT analysis. Again, let's talk about the journey. We think about an RFI, we're trying to do, what would a good consultant do for you in terms of pulling together all the information that's available about this company? So give you strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. I'll jump back up to the top and you can see where we've got some other capabilities we can offer. We've got latest news. So here we'll have metrics around anything that's happened reputationally, anything that might impact them within the marketplace. You can see there's some grids and some graphics here, and apologies, let me just jump in again. But there are grids and there are graphics there, which just allow you to make sense of that. Again, a whole series of, let me jump into those. You see graphics here, which will tell you system is making a an educated, taking an educated view in terms of things that are happening within the regulatory environment, etc., that you ought to be aware of. And again, it will grade those based on where you think they're most relevant, whether it's understanding the context in terms of the industry, the geography in which the vendor operates, and then it will, as before, it will take you down to the original sources for that information. Market insights, and so I won't go through all of this because it'll start to probably make your eyes roll. But where we've gone from, so what you need to know about the company, what's happening in their market, what's any events relevant to that, and then the final thing that we're doing with this is trying to get you on the front foot in terms of how you might engage with them. And this could be obviously in a first conversation or even in a QBR. This sort of thing. What are the things that are happening that you ought to be talking to them about to give you an information advantage in terms of when you're talking, what are the leverage points that you might have? So the system's also generating a set of 5 suggested things you might want to talk to them about. So there's some things about in terms of their performance versus the marketplace. There are things around ESG blind spots here, etc. And these are really designed to get you into that into a proactive conversation. So here are things we ought to talk about, not just about widget capability, etc. What are things that are happening to you that we ought to be talking about that you might want to be mitigating in terms of how we manage? So that gives us detail. And again, we'll talk about this a bit more at the end. We're super keen to be tested on this. If you've got those your categories, you want to go through this process, we'd really like to take you through it and show the capability that we can deliver. But as you can see from what my starting point as well, this is rich and it's deep and it's too much for every category in every instance. So that's, again, a key bit of demarcation for us. If I could stop sharing there, Sybil, I'll just jump out a second. And then if we just jump back into the slides, because I'm just conscious, I want to make sure that everyone understands where we are within the process that we shared.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. So the objective was to show you the side-by-side comparison. We've done run that query in the standardized sourcing version. You've seen the information that you get, and then we've done that in the the advanced sourcing. So you can see that it's the depth and the complexity that comes out of that, and also the way that it's fairly dynamic. So you can see this as when we talk about a much bigger data package, that's what it is. That comes at a cost. It takes more processing time effectively to build that capability. But in terms of the ROI, our clients tend to see is it's really taking a process that would take weeks effectively to build that really comprehensive view into what's an hour and a half basically from start to finish. And as I mentioned before, because of the way the system works, it's agnostic to verticals, etc. If you provide it with the right query, the right clues, give it that context, then it can generate this report on any category. And I think sort of that's a massive acceleration when you're sort of presented with either a transform category or even white space. Brenna, is there anything you would like to add on that, or my whiz through that you think might benefit the audience?
I think you've covered everything, David. The only thing that I'd like to again reiterate is, as you've mentioned, this sort of comprehensive discovery is not required in all cases, in all situations. So it is really about choosing which of the two works depending on what the requirement is, right? So it's just that's the key message that I'd like for us to take away on why we have two modules, one which is a more advanced module for discovery.
Perna, could you also tell our audience how they can make the most of their current supplier discovery solution as well? And if there are principles that apply to both advanced and standard supplier discovery?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Subul. So I think a lot of this was covered in the demo as well, but we have been, using the discovery module with customers, both on the Beroe Live.ai platform side and also on the Forestreet side, we have customers using the more advanced module. I think one thing that we keep reiterating and we see where the difference is between getting good results and getting not so good results is it is about what you put in, and the more the context you provide is uh, that's what is required, right? So I think the key thing here is be specific, not generic, and the next point is related, so I'm going to cover it together. Anchor every search in context. So I'll take an example, and this is a real example I was talking to a customer about. So if you put in a search saying I'm looking for emulsifiers. I want to buy emulsifiers in the United States, and the system will throw some keywords that are related to emulsifiers. So is it oil based? Is it of certain type? Is this what you're looking for? But I think, as most of us will know, emulsifiers are used in various industries, right? So your food grade emulsifiers are not the same as what you would use in agrochemicals. It's not the same as you used for skincare. Is not the same you used in food products. And even within that, if you are looking for very specialized emulsifiers, let's say for high end chocolates or for medical grade injectables, if you give a very generic query like emulsifiers, the results are going to give you the big companies, right? The global giants who do talk a lot about emulsifiers. However, if your query was medical grade injectable emulsifiers, then the two things will happen. One, the keywords you see that the AI is recommending will be much more specific, will be much more targeted to your use case. And secondly, when the results come back, there may be a few suppliers, but that is what you need, because you don't want to look at a list of 20, 30, 50 companies, most of which do not work for your industry or your specific use case. So I think the most important thing to do from in terms of using the module, whether it's the standard one we have on Beroe Live or the more advanced discovery module. In both cases, it is about putting in as much context as you can. I think we did see it in the demo, but this is something which amazes me every time I look at it. It is about those AI recommended keywords or AI generated keywords. So every time you put in a search query, you type about a capability, a product, or a service you're looking for, the AI will generate keywords. And I think I have seen our customers who are actually learning a lot more from the keywords that are being generated even before they go and look for suppliers. The keywords are telling them about new capabilities, new type of offerings that they may not even know exist in the market yet. Now, that is, of course, a starting point. And once they go in, they can use the topic mosaic, they can use the feature map to learn more about new emerging capabilities that are in there. And again, I will use another example. This is not a new emerging thing, but as an example, if you say I'm searching for glass bottle suppliers, the keywords will be including things like, are you looking for soda lime glass bottles? Are you looking for borosilicate glass bottles? And again, those keywords may give you another new type of material that's being used in glass bottles, let's say, which is more sustainable. It's a new innovation that maybe only one company is talking about out there. So I think those keywords are quite interesting for two purposes. One, to learn more about the supply market. And of course, second, to anchor your search or make your search as contextual as possible to your requirements. Once you get in, there are a bunch of filters that are there, which again give you that ability to narrow, because I think none of us want to go talk to 50 suppliers. The shorter the list, but we need to be confident that our short list is based on the parameters and the variables that are important to us. What we've also seen in a few customer situations is that the search is being run. However, once the shortlist is being taken back to the business, it is not as effective, and the reason is that in the first instance the business requirements were not clear. There were some very clear requirements the business had in terms of what is in, what is out. So that I think is quite important. Again, we've seen in client context. So all of these five principles that we are talking about here are based on us, engaging with our customers over the last many months. What separates, like I said, good from not so good discovery exercises. And again, on the platform itself, we have recently included more guides, more product tours, which help again reiterate these messages. So again, happy to discuss more as we engage further in the platform.
Thank you so much, Prerna. We now invite all the participants to go ahead and scan the QR code on your screens right now if you'd like to request a free trial of the Advanced Supplier Discovery solution. And we're going to try and answer a few of your questions. So the first question we have, audience members, how do you prevent the solution from turning into a long list of random suppliers that look relevant but aren't?
I can take that. It's essentially what I was just talking about. I think it is again reiterating those messages that if our search is quite broad, like packaging or glass bottles, we will end up with a very, very long list of suppliers. It's not going to be as specific. And of course, it's fine. Like, it's not going to be a problem. It's just that the reason we have tools like this is to save our time, to be faster at what we are trying to do, but also effective. So again, I would say it is about adding as much context, choosing the right keywords, choosing the right regions in there, which gives you a much shorter list that's relevant to your use case.
Brilliant. And another question is, how well does the solution perform with private companies or small organizations that might not even have a website? David, could you help us with that?
Of course. Okay, I'll differentiate between private companies and companies that don't have a website. So, so private companies, as long as that we're fundamentally looking for a digital presence as the first hook, right? So that's our sort of unique identifier tends to be we're looking for the domain, because actually that's globally standard, right? Lots of countries have different ways of sort of ticketing against companies. We use that as the starting point, and then we hook other things onto it, like DUNS number, etc. So we do look for a digital presence. We do know in some markets people don't necessarily have a website. We then tend to look for where they might be. That could be on social media in some markets. In China, we know that lots of vendors are on consolidated websites like Alibaba, etc. And so we consume that data. So at some point, there's a digital footprint somewhere. We'll pull that back. In terms of private sector, private company data, obviously they don't publish financials necessarily or detailed financials. We use third-party records to cover as much of that as we can. And actually recently we made a design decision in terms of trying to. There was a challenge. If you look at Beroe, for instance, you would find that there are at least 10 different estimates of revenue across the web. And so what we're doing now is we're weighting those, and we will flag if we're saying, looking at something like a number which is, there's dispute about this number, but it seems to coalesce around a particular space. We will call that out in the profile, but we will tag that and say this is based on the best available information, but it's not come from a sort of a Refinitiv or a D&B, etc. We'll pull that one out. So there are some information gaps in the in terms of the global information sort of ecosystem. And what we're doing is we will take the best available, put some smarts on top of that, and then we will flag to the users to say this is the best that's out there, and here's the consensus. So we'll try and make sense of a quite a complicated world that way.
Thank you, David. Now, another question is, does the advanced and the standard supplier discovery modules use the same source data?
Yes. Fundamentally, the engine is the same, but what I talked about is the data package that we use. So if you take the standard, just a simple example, we would use, in the advanced, we use news. We take lots of those 400 news sources and we consume them and index them. That we don't do that on the Beroe because it's a very big compute job. It takes quite a lot of time. And the decision was we'd rather save the time than take that. So you might find that when we look at sort of some of the momentum scores on the advanced one, we're looking at news about the company and we'll use that as some of the input and information. We don't do that on the within the standard one. And it's really, again, about right tool for the right job.
Right. Great. Another question is, one of our users was actually testing the tool while you were doing the demo with us, and she wants to know what's the best way to export a supplier list. So she has around 30 suppliers. Can she export it to Excel?
Yes, there's a button in the top right corner. It says export to CSV, and you can also you can export to PowerPoint, PDF, CSV, or actually there's an API connector which is there as well.
Brilliant. Another question is, will the solution include details on regulatory requirements such as BBBEE in South Africa? So it's a very specific one here.
I don't know off the top of my head what that acronym stands for.
It is a diversity requirement. So at this point, we're not currently covering that. However, it's something that we are exploring in our roadmap. But at this point, we do not cover BBBEE in South Africa.
Okay, thank you. And then another question is, how do we decide internally which categories deserve deeper discovery so that they can use the right approach and don't over-engineer everything?
I can take that. So I would say that it is a question of internally seeing that is this a high stake decision? Is this a new emerging area? Is this something that the business already has been sourcing for many years? Is this an area that is not seeing so much volatility, innovation externally? In which case, the reasons you typically do discovery is, let's say, one of your existing suppliers going out of business or they're not performing well and you're looking for alternatives. Now, in that case, you pretty much know the capabilities, you know what exists out there. You just need alternatives. So the standard discovery would work pretty well. However, if it's a new area for the business, it's, let's say, a new product line, and I'll give you some examples. A few years ago, we were looking at pea protein because meat-free burgers were just coming up. So in such a case, you don't necessarily know what the supply market looks like, what type of suppliers are there, what capabilities are there, what processes they use. So in that case, as an emerging area, you would look for advanced discovery. Similarly, influencer marketing, right, for a food and beverage business, now it's becoming more mainstream, but it's still an area where there are different kinds of companies, there are different models. So again, I would say one of the key two things that to look for is that something that is more volatile and dynamic in terms of innovation, in terms of capabilities? And is that something where you do have a high stakes decision, where you do want to make sure you have looked at all potential options? Because one of the things, again, I was discussing with one of our customers is oftentimes it's not about better negotiations with your current suppliers. It's about knowing what your other options are, because the negotiations that you're doing with incumbents also become stronger if you know how many other alternatives or what other alternatives you have out there.
Thank you, Prerna. Another question from one of our audience members is the company info that you provide validated, or is it just pulled from the web?
So I would say it's a mix. So it's a validated information. Now, I also want to be clear that the kind of accuracy does vary by country. So if you look at suppliers in China, for example, it is a slightly more closed market for a variety of reasons compared to, let's say, the United States. But we do use a combination of sources. Like David was giving an example, we do have a view of source authenticity. We do bring in private data sets as well into the mix. So it is a broader base that we're using than just public web data.
Thank you, Prerna. Now, another question is, and we can take this as the last question for the day, does advanced supply discovery work better for new categories or existing categories with new constraints, like new compliance requirements, for example?
I'm sorry to answer this so sort of blindly, but I think it's both. I think it just goes back to this idea. If the set of assumptions that you would typically be working on are starting to be unstable for whatever reason, because it's new and you just don't have them, or because actually you don't feel that you can rely on the assumptions about the category you had before, I think that's where it comes into its own. It's confidence level, really. That's the criteria that I would tend to use. And just a personal example, I mean, I've used this to research a subject on which I am not an expert, and still walked in and to rooms full of consultants and been able to sort of have a really rich conversation about what's going on in the marketplace. And so that sort of, I think it's this idea of going from I'm not really confident, I know what I'm looking for, I know the right questions, and then getting that level of confidence. That's the sort of the fork in the road that I would use in terms of would I go down the advanced path or again. And one of our early jokes about this was it was a tool to make you look good in front of your boss. That sort of that was one of our early sort of implicit design principles, and it's that rich information, verified, triangulated, and brought together in a way which is which allows you to tell a story and make sense of a complex issue.
Great. Thank you so much, David, and thank you, Prerna. We do have a request from one of our audience members requesting to see a brief demo of competitive benchmarking feature. And what we'd like to say is we'd love to set up a personalized demo for you for that, and we'll have someone follow up with you for that. Thank you so much to all of our audience for joining us today, and we wish you a great day ahead.